Okay. Fish.
Fish.
Hello, Aaliyah here, and for this project, I'm going to be working on a mermaid tail. Not this one specifically, because it was a project from a few years ago, and it's starting to wear thin in a few places. This one is a little bit more of an Aaliyah project and a little bit less of a Tyler project, but you're still going to see him coming in every once in a while to help out. Yeah, so let's get to it. I need some help. My prince. For the fluke of the tail, which is that flippity floppity part right at the end, I'm going to be taking a pair of bifins and turning it into a monofin, and then attaching some of this plastic. It happens to be plastic shelf liner, and the reason why I chose this over anything else was because of the flexibility and because it's clear. That way I can have some light shining through the tail. One thing that I've already done to the plastic on this tail is create these little notches that kind of stick through one side and hook around the other. That way I can keep these two pieces together in place while I'm working on the rest of it. Eventually I will glue that down. And then as for the design of the fluke, I've already mapped out this. It's really just a very simple fin, and I want it to be simple, realistic, and just kind of fish-like. So I'll get this all lined up, and then I can start tracing around it and get cutting. Along this part of the tail, I'm just adding a dotted line because I really want it to be jagged. Time to cut it out. We don't need this anymore. The great thing about using shelf liner is that you can cut it with scissors, and it really does make a nice smooth cut. Now, instead of cutting right across that dotted line that I have, I'm going to leave myself a bunch of extra space because I'm going to do a lot of vertical cuts afterwards to give the tail a little bit of that tattered look. All right, time for our vertical cuts. Now that that part's finished, I'm going to start gluing this together, and I'm using some E6000 glue. Really laying it in there. I'll undo one of my little snaps and get the glue up in this top part now. With the two pieces for the plastic part of our fluke together, we can start working on attaching our bifins to make it into a monofin. Now you may notice on my bifins, I actually cut a whole section off of the back. It used to be really thick ridges like this, but I wanted to make sure that it would lay flush with our plastic and adhere a little bit better. So the way it looks is that we're going to need to cut off a little bit of plastic still so that these fit right down into those edges. So let's do that. With our bifins and plastic all glued up, I'm going to give this a chance to dry, and then we'll come on back to it. I've put some weights on this just to kind of help hold everything together while it's drying, and in the meantime I really want to add a little bit of an edge to our fluke. So I've already done it on one side. I'm using this black tubing that I've sliced right down the middle so that I can kind of press it on over the edge of our plastic. And then I'm going to adhere it using a little bit more of our glue. And we're adding little extra bits to our fins. make it look really realistic. Well, after taking all of the weights off, I realized something. My plastic is not sticking to the flippers. So our first glue didn't work. That's okay. It's sort of about trial and error. So I ended up going to a store and bought a couple of different options, and I'm just gonna kind of cycle through them and see if any of it works. I got some extra super glue that says that it's supposed to adhere rubber in most plastics, some duct tape because duct tape, and zip ties. We'll see what happens. All right, I don't know how well you can see, but right there I tried using this glue, and it seems as though it adhered okay. So we're just gonna give it a shot. And if this doesn't work, then we've got a couple backup options. Hopefully round 2 works. I guess we'll check back in a few hours. It works! We have a flippity floppity tail that actually stays together. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to set this aside for now and get working on the sleeve of the tail, you know, like the part that goes around your legs. This is the paper pattern that I made for my legs. In order to create it, all I did was take a nice long piece of paper, sit down on it, and I traced right around my legs all the way down to my ankles, and then I laid down to get the trace line across my hips up to my waist. In order to make sure that all of those measurements were totally accurate, I went a step further and I used a measuring tape to go all the way around and check those measurements at my waist, my hips, my tush, my knees, my calves, and my ankles. The reason for that is because certain areas, if you're just doing the trace method, aren't going to account for, you know, the rounder parts of your body. And so if you don't account for those, your tail is going to be too small in those places. So to make sure that those are all correct, all you have to do is take that round measurement, cut it in half, and check it across those measurements in those areas, and then adjust if needed. The fabric that I'm using for this tail is a very, very stretchy dance material, and I chose it in this kind of like a nude tone to match my skin because I want the tail to blend seamlessly when I'm wearing it. Since the front and the back of my pattern are exactly the same, I'm just going to go ahead and pin both sides of this material together so that when I make the cut, I only have to do it once. With the fabric all lined up, we can go ahead and start pinning our pattern to the fabric. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of extra space at the top in case I need to extend the tail a little bit higher. Now that this is all pinned down, I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Turns out it's much easier to do this with a rotary cutter. And now I'll go ahead and repin this so that I can sew it together. I'm going to start off by doing a straight stitch, and then I'll go back over and do a zigzag stitch. That'll just kind of help reinforce things. You may have noticed that while I was sewing, I was pulling the fabric taut. That's a really good thing to do when you're working with stretchy materials. That way it'll maintain its ability to stretch. You're not going to be taxing the thread as much. The base of the tail is just about finished, and it fits the monofin pretty well. You'll notice that it's a little bit boxy, and that's because I still have to trim it. And you may see, I'm not sure if you guys can see, but all of the lines from our flippers do show through. And so to cover that up, I have some EVA foam that I'm going to cut into sort of like this rounded diamond shape and stick right underneath the fabric, and that'll just kind of hide any little lumpy bumpy parts. First one's done, now it's time for the back side. We have our little smoother outer thingies. Slip this one on underneath and we'll see how it fits. Ooh, that's pretty darn perfect. Yes. All right. I think that is going to look splendid. You know, now that we have the entire base of the tail done with our monofin and our sleeve, I am going to call it quits for this video. And next time, you're gonna see all of the color get added and all of the scales. And then it'll really start looking like something cool and not some weird thrown together tail that I made, you know? So if you like what you saw with this project, stay tuned for the next video and like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time. Quick little disclaimer about the tail that is on the table and the one behind me. I considered these to be prop tails, not professional swimmable mermaid tails by any means. You can see that in the way that I'm designing it and in the materials that I'm using. I'm choosing my materials based on aesthetics alone, not necessarily on their functionality. And so if you want to create a professional mermaid tail, you're probably going to want to make some adjustments, not only in you know, the materials that you're using, but also in safety features. I typically create these for photo shoots or for, you know, the art of it, not necessarily for swimming in. They can be swam in, but I'm a very strong swimmer, very confident in the water, and even I stay really close to the shore and make sure that I go out with somebody, so if something does go wrong, I have some help. So keep all of that in mind. Really listen to that disclaimer. These are props, not professional, and have fun making your own.